Hello, I'm Dr. David Santos. We are moving into medieval and Celtic pagan myth and religion. So, a bit of a shift from our previous videos and lectures where we've gone through the ancient world, we've looked at the classical world, and now we get a little bit closer to our contemporary times. And a lot of the myths that we examine in the next 10 videos probably a little bit more familiar to some of you, and certainly have a completely different feel to them in terms of their technology, languages, just broadly our familiarity with them. In this lecture, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to very briefly hit on a series of different religions just to get an understanding of the broad scope of things. And then we're going to look at a few things in particular. So as we move into this, what we need to understand is looking at the period of 500 AD to 1500 AD. So a lot of the medieval stuff will be very familiar to some of you. And the reason why, it's an interesting time period because you start to get all these just different cultures starting to overlap. Christianity is growing throughout the world, and even among these cultic traditions, you're going to start to see them get Christianized, but really maintaining aspects from their history and from their folklore. So you get this kind of Christianized folklore as we move into some of these traditions. From the collapse of the Western Roman Empire to the dawn of the early modern period, many non-monotheistic religions continue to shape the spiritual life of communities across. We're going to be looking at Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. These traditions, commonly labeled pagan or cultic, did not simply vanish with the rise of Christianity and as well as Islam. Instead, they often coexisted, they adapted, and they're absorbed into emerging universal faiths. The following is where we're going to start, is this really brief survey of a bunch of those, as I suggested earlier. We're going to explore key cultic systems during the medieval period, and we're going to highlight their myths, beliefs, geographic influence, and eventual decline or transformation. We're starting out with Norse paganism, which includes Scandinavia and the North Atlantic areas. Norse religion was the dominant belief system among the Scandinavian people until the 11th century. Its cosmology was rooted in their myth of Yggdrasil. I'm going to be terrible at some of these names. These things just do not roll off my tongue. I'll do the best I can. But you can get some of the stuff from the reading as well. So this is the world tree, which connected the 9 worlds, including Asgard, the realm of the gods, Midgard, world of humans, and Hel, the underworld. Central deities include Odin, the god of wisdom and war, Thor, god of thunder and protector of mankind, and Freya, goddess of love and fertility. The Norse believed in fate and anticipated the end of the cosmos in Ragnarok. Yes, there's a movie, so this may help some of you. You can feel free to skip the lecture and watch the movie. Final battle where the gods and giants would destroy each other, paving the way for a renewed world. Religious rituals involved animal sacrifice, offerings at sacred groves, seasonal festivals such as Yule. The conversion of Scandinavia was a gradual process driven by kings such as Olaf. I'm not going to try his name. We'll get to that one later. And missionary activity. Iceland officially converted in 1000 AD, though folks still practiced their mythical beliefs, and they continue to survive through poetry and oral lore. Now, Celtic folklore is very interesting. With that, we're talking about the British Isles, Brittany, and while the classical Druidic priesthood had faded by the early medieval period, Celtic paganism continued in folk forms across Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Britain. The Celts venerated natural places such as rivers, springs, hills, and groves, and believed in a spiritual world populated by fairies, ancestors, and elemental beings. And I find something interesting about this in that in some ways it's not that much different from a lot of the other traditions globally. So if we look at, say, Native Americans from North America, for example, a lot of the same elements. Now, there's different practices because their technology is different, certainly, but at the base of it, there's a lot of similarities around. And here, their calendar included festivals that marked the new year and the thinning of the veil between the worlds. They had a spring fire festival. They have the Imbolc, which is associated with fertility, and the goddess Brigid. As Christianity spread through the region, especially from the 5th century onward, many of these traditions were syncretized. Saints often replaced older deities, and that's a big one in taking saints, replacing deities with those saints, or maybe not even always deities, but they're the heroes, and building a completely new mythology and mythos around the blending of these things. So it's you get some good stories, and we're gonna look at some of those stories. It's not necessarily good for maintaining good doctrine and Christian practice, but that's not our conversation for today. So we get the Christian holy days aligned with earlier seasonal festivals. Though the institutional religion changed, the worldview remained deeply mythic and animistic well into the Middle Ages. And I don't know that we've properly looked at how anthropologists see the progression of religion. We probably need to do that. Animism is one of the earlier stages of religious development. In their view, you move from animism to having some sort of pantheon to polytheism, eventually to monotheism. There's some other stages, but they see this as a linear progression. And then, of course, they would say the next progression is no religion at all. And of course, this is ridiculous. If we look biblically, this is a problematic idea because of simply look at where monotheism shows up with in terms of the biblical narrative. But they don't believe that anyways, and they discount. So anyways, understand this worldview is definitely looking at an animistic kind of idea where they're looking at the natural world and building a worldview around it that include all these additional aspects. So we'll have fun with that over the next few weeks. Next area is the Germanic paganism. We call it Anglo-Saxon and continental tribes. Among these early medieval Germanic tribes, whether it's Anglo-Saxons, Franks, continental Saxons, religion focused on gods like Woden or Odin, Thunor or Thor, and Frigg, as well as tribal. So they have tribal totems. They have sacred trees. The Irminsul is a sacred wooden pillar, symbolized the axis of the cosmos, and played a role in Saxon religion, and is an important part of the religious life until it was destroyed by Charlemagne's forces in the 8th century. Germanic myths emphasized honor, loyalty, and the role of divine fate. Rituals include sacrificial feasts and warrior initiation rites. The Christianization of Germanic Europe was aggressive in places involving not only missionary preaching, like St. Boniface, but also military conquest and forced baptism. By the 9th century, most of these peoples had nominally converted, though residual paganism and folk customs persisted. And like the previous other sections, what we see is this idea of blending these traditions and developing a new Christianized folklore that maintain a lot of these old religious and mythical traditions. And we do see at this point, we're getting into Crusader time periods. Once we get to the Middle Ages, crusading begins. Crusading begins with pushing back Islamic invasions. Just understand that. So when it begins, and it's mostly in the Middle East, protecting Christians from this attack was where these things begin. Once you move on, and we've done lectures and classes on the Crusades specifically, Christianity really goes off course in some of these places, and how the Crusades proceed eventually becomes European on European violence. They can't tell the difference between one version of Christianity and the other. So these things become a real problem, and it's not true Christianity. And if you look at the doctrines they're maintaining as well, you see where they're getting this, and they're no longer actually Christians. They're only bullies with in Christian name. So we'll get to examine some of that, because it's important for us to see the folklore or the myth that develops around crusading and around Knights Templar and things like that. It's no longer Christian doctrine, and they pulled a lot of interesting stuff. So we'll look forward to that. Next, we're going to look at the Slavic pagan. This is Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Slavic paganism encompassed a pantheon of deities, including Pagan, which is thunder and war, Veles, the underworld and cattle, Zvorog, the sky and fire, and Makash, the mother goddess and fertility. So these beliefs were practiced in Kievan Rus, which is Poland, and Poland and the Balkans before Christianization. Mythology often reflected the dualism between sky and earth. Rituals involve sacrifice near rivers, groves, hilltops, and sanctuaries. The Slavs practice ancestral worship at seasonal festivals tied to agriculture and lunar cycles. The official Christianization took place of Kievan Rus under Prince Vladimir in 988, really marked the beginning of the decline of the public Slavic religion. However, many elements such as fertility rites, masks, protective charms survived through folk Christianity and rural superstition. So again, many similarities, things we've looked at in previous lectures. Similarities in context, very different in practice though. Next, we're looking at the Baltic paganism, which is Lithuania, Latvia, and Old Prussia. The Baltic people preserved their indigenous religion longer than any other group in Europe. Their deities included Divas, the sky god. We have a god of thunder. We have a god of fate. We have a god of fire and home. Religion was intertwined within nature worship, and sacred fire rituals were maintained by priestesses. The Lithuanian people resisted Christianization well into the 14th century, and it wasn't until the political pressure of alliances with Christian kingdoms that the Grand Duke converted in 1387. Even after conversion, many rural communities continued traditional practices in secret. The Prussians, on the other hand, were targeted by Teutonic Knights in the Northern Crusades and forcibly converted, or worse, at times exterminated. So the indigenous Sami people of the far north retained an animalistic and shamanic worldview well into the modern era. Their religion emphasized interaction with spirits of animals, ancestors, and natural elements, often through trance states, including by drum rituals led by their priests, sacred places, which would be like rock formations or sites inhabited by spirits, the sedi, where these are focal points of worship. Sami cosmology was tiered, including a middle world, upper sky realm, and lower underworld. And although Christian missionaries began reaching the Sami in the Middle Ages, full conversion didn't take place until the 17th century. The Tengriism, this is the Turkic and Mongol steppe people. They have a traditional religion of Tengriism, and this is the religion of these nomadic people, including the Huns, for example. The central deity is Tengri, the eternal blue sky, considered a sovereign force that granted kingship and cosmic order. They also had earth and ancestral spirits. Rituals involved animal sacrifice, sky grazing, shamanic divination. When the Mongol Empire rose in the 13th century, leaders like Genghis Khan emphasized their divine mandate from Tengri. However, many Mongol rulers eventually adopted Islam, Buddhism, or Christianity, and it eventually fades away. Zoroastrianism, one that we've looked at within the classical period, because in the classical period we saw a lot of development of the Zoroastrianism and their practices and beliefs. This is one of the state religions of the Sassanid Empire. Zoroastrianism faced decline after the Islamic conquest of Persia in the 7th century. Its theology is dualistic, with Ahura Mazda as the wise creator, and then it has a counterpart, Angra, I think it's Angra Mainyu, as this destructive spirit. Key practices included ritual purity, sacred fire, worship, and ethical living. That ethical living is based on principles of good thought, good words, good deeds. Although persecuted, Zoroastrianism survived in isolated communities in Iran, migrated to India, where it was maintained in faith. Elements of Zoroastrian eschatology were developed from Christian thought, much like Islamic thought was as well. So, and those developments probably took place in the same time period as Christian eschatology was being preached. I know, even in some of my notes and things, it'll say that Zoroastrianism is the origin of some of these things, and that's what a lot of the literature makes the claim of. Just understand, just reverse that to get what the reality is in that. And we have evidence for that. It's not a big deal. We have the Kurdish highlands. Yazidism is the syncretic religion native to the Kurdish regions, blending ancient Mesopotamian, Zoroastrian, Christian, and Sufi Islamic traditions. At the center of its theology is Melek Taurus, the peacock angel, a divine figure who fell and was restored, often misunderstood as a devil, but it sounds like a fallen angel to me. Anyways, they practice a highly ritualized oral tradition and consider some teachings secret, passing only within the community. Their religion places importance on reincarnation, moral purity, pilgrimage to sacred shrines, and they had periodic persecution and battles with other religions. So, traditional African religions. African traditional religions were numerous. They're varied, including, like, for example, the Bantu system. Common elements including belief in a supreme creator god, a host of intermediary spirits, sometimes deities, ancestor veneration, spirit possession, and divination. Rituals often took place at sacred grove shrines or in the context of communal festivals. Though Islam spread across North and West Africa and Christianity persisted in Ethiopia, these indigenous religions adapted and synchronized, forming the basis for more consolidated religious traditions. The Berber paganism, this is North Africa, prior to widespread Islamic movements, the Berbers of North Africa practiced polytheistic and animistic religion centered on local deities, ancestor cults, and astral powers. Remnants of these beliefs, such as reverence for sacred stones, seasonal rituals, persisted into Islamic periods. Hinduism seems to take a little bit different path within the literature. It's in a way set aside as its own category, but for our purposes here, we see in the medieval period really a development that establishes this complex religious tradition. Key deities are Vishnu, he's the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer, and then we get other gods, Devi, goddess in multiple forms. So we get devotional movements emerge during this time, emphasizing personal worship and emotional connection to a chosen deity. Sacred texts like I can't even say it. Their sacred texts are interesting because they begin to be dispersed, they're circulated and interpreted, and temple culture flourished within the religion. So, like we said, lot of development in this period. In India, Naples, and Tibet, we get Tengriism. It's developed as an esoteric subset of both Hinduism and Buddhism, and it emphasizes secret knowledge. They establish mantras and ritual of union of opposites. Its practices include asceticism, visualization, sexual yoga, and offering designs to break through illusion and achieve liberation. Active, especially in Kashmir, Bengal, and Tibet, certain regions. They had schools, were often marginalized by Orthodox religion, but highly influential in temple ritual, and sacred art. In Japan, the Shinto is an indigenous religion of Japan on kami, spirits or deities associated with nature, ancestors, and the imperial family. Core myths such as the descent of the sun goddess and the creation of Japan were enshrined into texts. Shinto rituals emphasize purity, seasonal festivals, and offerings at shrines during the medieval period. Shinto coexisted with Buddhism. They have some shared doctrines or theories which viewed kami as local manifestations of Buddhist deities. So they just syncretized them so they can get along. Despite Buddhist dominance, the philosophy and monasticism of Shinto remained vital in court and popular life. Of course, Taoism, which we've looked at in previous videos, blended philosophical teaching from Tao with religious practices involving a vast pantheon of ritual, including magic, alchemy. Taoist cosmology emphasizes harmony with the Tao, the Way, a cosmic principle governing all existence. During the Tang and Song dynasties, Taoism developed a temple system, priesthoods, and ritual texts. It completed with the coexistence alongside Buddhism and Confucianism. Taoist festivals and exorcism and meditative practices remained influential, especially among the common people and local magistrates. Moved to a different continent. Aztec religion was this complex state-supported system centered on cosmic cycles, ritual bloodletting, and human sacrifices. Priestly classes conducted ceremonies aligned with sacred calendar and monumental temples. And the Spanish conquest really brought into some of this, although it kind of ended earlier. Maya, this is the post-classic Maya religion, continued traditions of polytheism, ancestor worship, calendar and divination, and ritual bloodletting. And most of you probably pretty familiar with these deities. Include the hero twins, featured an elaborate myth cycles. Priests used complex calendars to determine the timing of rituals, and religion was deeply integrated into political life, with rulers acting as intermediaries between humans and gods. Despite conquest, many Maya religious concepts endure in syncretic forms, so they're blending these things among rural communities, especially. And finally, the Inca religion in the Andes. The Inca Empire developed this hierarchical religious system centered on Inti, the sun god, as well as the creator god. And the Sapa Inki was regarded as a divine figure, and mummified ancestors of past rulers were honored in ceremonial processions. Sacred geography played a vital role, with mountains and rivers worshipped as living spirits. The religion was used to integrate conquered peoples who were encouraged to bring their gods into the imperial pantheon. Spanish conquest and the destruction of temples led to the collapse of the formal religion, but Indian religious ideas persisted in popular Catholicism and other rural traditions. And that concludes our rapid fire survey, broadly looking at pagan myths and religions within the medieval period. From here, we're going to move into first thing we'll look at are creation and the Celtic world in the next video. So come and hang out with us in that video as well.